I'm on.
Cool. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. Just a reminder, we have the chat feature. We'll have the order. Please state your name and affiliation before you ask your question, and also please let Coach or Martin know who the question is directed at. We'll start off with Scott Abraham from ABC7.
Good morning, Ron and Martin. This question, I guess I'll start off with Martin. Can you share your philosophy, Martin, of determining when to draft a player for a position of need versus, I guess, drafting simply the best player on the board at the time, regardless of position?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a balance between those two. Obviously, you don't want to reach for players just because of what position that those players play. But by the same token, you have to be cognizant of what your needs are throughout the draft and try to fill those needs if possible.
And then a quick follow-up question to Martin. When it comes to your current quarterbacks on the roster, you could argue you have a short-term plan in place, but your long-term kind of solution right now at the quarterback position might be a question mark. So you look at the young quarterbacks in this draft. Do you feel like you have to go after one of those quarterbacks and address that maybe long-term solution at the quarterback position in this year's draft?
It's a really good question and one that I won't answer. I mean, I won't get into that for strategic reasons, but we do feel very confident and comfortable with the quarterbacks on our roster right now. I'm excited about working with each and every one of those guys, and we'll see where it goes.
Thank you.
So NBC4 and then WUSA.
Moises Linares from NBC4 for Coach Rivera. I know you're not going to tell us who you might select in the draft, but I'm curious to know is there something you do? Do you have a ritual before the draft to get you ready? We know players do different things. Do you do something different to get prepared for that big day?
Not necessarily. I think the biggest thing that we do more than anything else is just, constantly review and go over things. The toughest thing that we have to do this year, obviously picking at 19 is we're going to have to react to what happens in front of us. But as far as anything, kind of on a quote unquote superstitious side, no, not for the draft. As a player, I used to do a lot of things, but not getting ready for the draft.
I don't believe Darren's on, so we go Nikki and then John Kine.
I guess this is for both Martin and Ron. How have your projections changed at all for guys in this draft, given the limitations with COVID and the fewer games that a lot of prospects have played? Have you guys had to do anything differently in terms of the way you evaluate players?
Yeah, well, obviously COVID and opt-outs pretty much affect everybody. This has been an ongoing process going back to, last May. Our college scouts do their college reports and they hit the road in the fall. So we've been building this data over a period of time. Some guys have opted out, some guys opted back in. Like every year, there's going to be different issues with players. Opting out can be looked at as a concern because of the time off, just not playing football last fall. But by the same token, you can look at it as some of these guys who are excelling, playing at a very high level. There's not as much wear and tear on those guys. So we evaluate each situation individually. I don't think it's going to have a dramatic impact on the players that we end up selecting, but it is a factor that we have to evaluate.
And probably the biggest thing also, Nikki, for those guys that have opted out, we've had to rely on a lot of tape from last year, from the 2019 season, excuse me. So we've had to go back and really try and find those guys there. And, the hard part is a lot of those guys that we're looking at this year, you want to look at this year, you don't know if they've taken the next step. You have nothing to compare their growth to. So drafting a guy that opted out, you're hoping as an athlete, as a football player, they've grown. So that's going to be a little bit on what you've seen in the past, what you've seen during the workouts, the pro days, and also what you're getting on the Zoom meetings. One of the benefits to this year is, you being able to do the Zooms. Each team can Zoom a guy up to 5 times, and a guy that you're truly interested in, you're going to use all 5. In my opinion, you would if he opted. I know we did. If he opted out, you're going to use as many of those Zooms as you can to get as much information as you can from these young men.
And just as a quick follow-up to that, for offensive linemen specifically, a lot of guys coming from spread offenses, I know there's been a lot of questions in the past about what it's like projecting that position. Does the added layer of COVID make that more challenging for that position specifically?
I would say only if the guy opted out and all they did was, they were in the spread and they were always in a 2-point. They were always, their run game was really just a zone scheme. I think that's one of the things that, like you said, that's where the projection comes in, especially for a team like us that runs counter, plant, and traps. Runs a gap scheme basically. That's a little bit different. So we do project a little bit when you do look at offensive line.
Hey guys, it's John Keim, ESPN. For both of you, going back to the quarterback position and kind of playing off what Nikki just asked about projections, there are a lot of guys after that first round, or more than a few in this draft, who only have a certain number of games played. At that position, does this year make it more challenging to try and project them?
I would say so. I think for me, especially evaluating quarterbacks, I think time spent on the job is definitely a positive. So anytime you see guys with limited time on the job, that is a concern for me with the quarterback position. And there certainly are more of those guys this year.
I think when you look at these guys and everybody's a projection, in my opinion. First of all, there are very, very few there are very few sure hits, and even those are questions. So there is a lot of guesswork that's going to go into it. The quarterback position is, as much as any, it's such a tough one to figure out. And obviously, I agree with what Martin said, and that is time spent, as many snaps as possible, getting as much work as you can. That helps a lot because there's a lot of tape to evaluate. You can go back as far as you want and see just the growth. That's important as well. So yeah, to that point, yes, I agree exactly with what Martin said.
And then also going back to free agency, what level of freedom did you get for the draft based on your free agency signings, as far as where you can address what you want to do?
Well, I think what our front office did and what we were able to do in free agency really helped us. I think Martin and Marty and their guys really helped put us in position where, going back to the very first question that Martin answered, hey, we got to really look at drafting best player available but always keeping in mind what we think that the true need is. But I think we freed ourselves up because of what they did.
JP.
Hey guys, JP Finley. I wanted to start with a question for Martin. There's so much discussion about moving up for quarterbacks. It's always kind of centered around getting young quarterbacks. With the amount of talent and the expected movement at quarterback early in this draft, how would you guys look at maybe moving up for a non-quarterback?
Well, I think, not to get into specific positions, but anytime you look at moving up or down, it's just really about what, can you create value making that move? Obviously, if you can move up and get a player who you really like and not give up a whole lot, that's what you want to do. You would move back if you could move back and get a lot in return for moving back. So it's about the value that exists there either way. So from my standpoint, we're open to doing either right now. It's going to depend on just the entire process, and we're working through some things right now.
Thank you. And then, Ron, a question for you. As you've always kind of tried to have the big picture outlook with the Washington organization, has the increased movement at the quarterback position, a veteran quarterback? I mean, you look at Brady, Stafford, Goff. There are more big name quarterbacks moving around now than what's maybe in a long time. Does that maybe change, or how does that impact your outlook of having to get a young quarterback this year or next year?
Well, I think from a big picture perspective, it's really about getting the right quarterback, whether it's a young guy or an old guy. You've got to look and say, hey, this is the fit that we need. This is the fit that we want. Now it's the time. We'll see. Again, as far as the draft's concerned, we're going to react to what happens in front of us. Picking at 19, kind of putting us in the middle is going to be interesting as far as we're concerned.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Ron, I wanted to ask you about a non-draft question. I'm sure you've seen some of the other teams, the players have made the statement that they're not going to participate in the optional workouts. I was curious how your conversation went with your team about that and what you anticipate being able to do.
I think that conversation has gone very well. I've reemphasized that it's all voluntary. We're holding nothing against anybody. I've told the coaches, we had a meeting today as coaches, hey guys, we saw these things going on. There's a lot of pressure on the players. There's COVID is still out there. So from our perspective, it's a voluntary program and we'll go from there. But I've talked to a lot of our guys who have called me and I told each guy it's a voluntary program. So we'll address it as it happens. But I do appreciate the guys that have reached out a lot, and I appreciate the tough situation they're in.
And then obviously players getting the vaccine is another issue. Have you had discussions with guys about that? How do you feel like they're being receptive to that?
I think the guys are being very receptive. We made ourselves available. We did a thing where we sent the notes out to the guys, basically an invitation letter, and inviting them to our voluntary off-season program, and said that you had any questions on it and you felt you needed to call, please feel free to call our head trainer, our infectious control officer, and or our team doctor if you needed any information. And so hopefully, guys can get those questions answered and they can get vaccinated if they feel they want to.
Appreciate it.
Rhiannon?
Good morning, Ron. Good morning, Martin. It's good to see you all both. Martin, I wanted to start with you. I noticed when you were in Detroit as the general manager, the only quarterback you ever drafted was Matthew Stafford, and obviously you hit on him. So when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks, things that you like in them, it's hard to kind of figure that out when there's just the one guy you've drafted. But what, typically speaking, do you look for in a quarterback coming out of college? What are some things that you noticed in other quarterbacks that maybe you didn't draft, but you really like necessarily?
Yeah, I would say one of the benefits for us in this draft is people not knowing what traits that I'm really excited about. All those guys at the top are pretty different. I won't get into that, but just to talk in general, it's really not about what I like. It's the collaboration with myself, with Marty, with Coach, with Eric, Tim Gribble. I can't say enough about the great job our scouts have done in this process thus far, and it really will be a very collaborative process.
Okay, then the second question for both you and Ron is in terms of linebackers. Ron, you've mentioned linebackers a few times. I've noticed the success that you've had drafting linebackers in the past, whether it's Kyle Van Noy, Tahir Whitehead, or for instance, with Marty Herney, obviously you have Luke Kuechly, John Beeson, guys like that. How do you guys come up with just the assessment? How do you guys hit on linebackers the way that you all have in the past? And Ron, I guess just whatever Marty you can share about what he looks for, what you guys talk about collaboratively speaking, just what has come with the success of picking the linebackers you guys have in the past?
Well, I think, going back and looking at what we've done, a lot of it has to do with, has to do with the players that were available to begin with. My look, when you got a guy like Luke Kuechly, that was a hard one to mess up. That's the truth. When you look at him and see the way he plays, and see that he plays downhill, and see that he plays with his hands, and as smart as he is, that to me was a no-brainer. But when we picked Shaq Thompson, the thing that we looked at Shaq was position flex, athleticism, intelligence, because we were going to ask him to do a lot. And he fit the bill. Coming here and looking at Cole Holcomb and knowing here's an athletic guy that's smart, that has some position flex, you felt good. Look at what we did, having John Bostic and looking at great communication and leadership skills. There's a guy that you felt really good about. So as we dive into this, I think again, just looking for position flex guys that can play more than one spot, because today's game does ask that, because what we call our Sam linebacker in our defense is going to end up playing like a Buffalo nickel, like a big nickel at times. So we're going to need a guy that has that kind of flexibility if we start looking at that. You look at our will position is a guy that can play like a Mike, that can play downhill, can be stout. But he's also got that position flex that if you get in a pinch, he can play the Mike. And the Mike really is just got to be a great communicator. So as we look at all three of those spots, we sit there and we say, if we get a guy that can be the will, a guy like Cole Holcomb, because his ability can play the Buffalo nickel. If you get the Buffalo nickel or the Sam type guy, he has the ability to come in, he can play the will. And then again, a Mike is just a guy you're looking for that could play the will, play the Mike, but also play the will if you had to have him. So it's really, to me, a lot of it has to do about football intelligence, the ability to have multiple position flex. Those are the things that help and have helped us.
And then Martin, what do you attribute? I mean, Tahir Whitehead was a 5th round pick. Calvin Oy was 2nd round. What do you attribute to the DeAndre Levy? I forgot about him. Like, what do you attribute to the success that you've had picking linebackers in the past? Like, what do you commonly see in them that gives you the indication that they could be successful at this level?
Well, linebacker position on the defense, has to have a lot of different skills. He has some skills that are similar to what, the guys up front do, and also some skills to what the secondary guys have. So, the varied skill set is really important, and that was important with Levy and Tahir. But I think every scheme is different. Every player has individual skills that might appeal to us, and we'll just make the best decision, based on what's available to us, and probably just let our board speak to us as to who the best pick is.
Ron, Martin, thank you guys. Appreciate you.
All right, Ray, thank you.
Go Sam Fortier, then Ben Standing.
Hey guys, Sam Fortier with the Washington Post. This is for both of you. I think since you guys drafted, Matthew Stafford and Cam Newton #1 overall, I think in the last few years, there hasn't been the success in the top 5, top 10 quarterbacks that you might have expected. I wonder if there's a reason for that. And I wonder if that's an argument to maybe say, hey, this quarterback isn't ranked a 1st round guy or a top 10 guy or whatever, but we like some things about him. Maybe, we can look for a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, again, not to get into specific positions, but yeah, I mean, the quarterback position is a very difficult position to play, and as we're witnessing now, they're not really 32 great starters in the National Football League right now. There's been a lot of movement this offseason. I anticipate that will continue. It's something that you're always looking for. If you don't have one as a GM, you're always looking for that. I don't think that process ever stops. And I think there's a lot of pressure on that position. A lot of these guys, have been very, very highly recruited, very, highly thought of, have not faced as much adversity as they face going into in NFL City and dealing with the expectations. I think that's certainly part of the process. But, it's a very, very difficult position to play. I don't think that all the guys that don't make it are not good football players. I think a lot of times it has to do with the circumstances that those guys get put into. That has a lot to do with whether they succeed or fail. Again, we feel very confident with the group that we have. Like any position, if we can upgrade it, we'll try to upgrade it. But we feel confident and feel good about the group that we have right now.
I echo Martin's sentiments on that. It's a very difficult position, and as everybody knows, where you're being picked is no guarantee of success. So a lot of it has to do with who you pick. A lot of it has to do with that person's makeup, and a lot to do with your team. Do you have the ability to protect that player, and do you have playmakers around that player? So there's a lot of factors that go into it. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot as well.
And in the last 2 drafts before this one, there were about 1,800 players in each that signed with agents and with the process. This year, there's only about 600, so about a third of the pool normally. I wonder, does the smaller pool change what you guys are able to do or change your process at all?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference in the process. I do think that it will impact, the quality of this draft and the quality of next year's draft. You're talking about having that many more players that are juniors coming out next year, or players that went back for an extra year this year. I think we can anticipate that next year's draft will be a little bit higher quality, but time will tell. The important thing for us is the players that we pick. And we want to pick the best players for us. And it's been a good process so far. Like I said, our college scouts have done a great job. I should have mentioned our coaches as well. Did a tremendous job in our meetings last week. I think we're still in the process of meeting right now. There's a lot of ground to be covered. But I felt the process is really important, and we want to pick the best players for us.
I echo that as well. First of all, our scouts have done a great job for us and bringing the information to us, considering that they, again, kind of went through a little bit of what they did last year, not really getting an opportunity to get inside and get to know the guys like they've had in the past. But this year, it's just a smaller pool of guys to work through. So you really get more of an opportunity to truly dive deep. Next year, it's going to be interesting to see, if it's more than that number, that normal number, Sam. If it's going to be more than what you said, 1,800, will it be will it be 2,800? I mean, if it is, then that's going to be a lot of things we got to go through. And you're going to have to eliminate guys a lot quicker. It's one of those things that you sit there and say, God, you're watching tape and you're going, man, I wish that kid had come out. And you say, God, I wish that kid had stayed. I mean, there's a little bit of that going on right now too. So. We're gonna have to be, very careful and pick very wisely, because of the size of this pool.
Thank you, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Ben Standig with The Athletic. Question for both of you. You've already stated that obviously the quarterback position is a challenging one, and it's a tough on young guys coming to the league. The fact that there is a lot of uncertainty right now with the offseason program, as Ron addressed earlier with the volunteer OTAs, and just we still don't even quite know how training camp will work, things like that. Does that factor in at all to how you might determine whether you would draft a quarterback, knowing that uncertainty?
Well, I think it's something that, again, this is all part of the situation. This should not drive your decision one way or the other, because each team will have to deal with this as well. So we're just going to, again, react to what happens in front of us. We pick number 19 in the first round, and we'll see what happens.
I would agree with that.
Okay, and then a follow-up then for Ron. Ron, you've talked a lot about having a quarterback competition. We can maybe assume that Ryan Fitzpatrick has got the big lead, but regardless, you've said a competition, and presumably that's with the other veterans on your team. You went through this last year where you had a young quarterback in Dwayne who needed to get the reps, and you chose to give him as many as possible. How do you balance, if you do draft a rookie quarterback, getting, especially one in the early rounds, getting that player enough work while simultaneously having a competition that's going to involve multiple veterans, presumably?
Well, if I come to that bridge, I'll cross
it. So you foresee the necessary reps available during a standard training camp to deal with that type of thing?
Again, Ben, if I get to that bridge, we'll cross it.
All right.
We have a little bit of luck. Yeah, Matt Paris with the Washington Times. Ron, I remember you saying last year for the number 2 pick, you needed to draft, like with that pick, it's a high impact guy, a guy who can come in right away and make a huge difference. I'm wondering for the both of you, how do you view the number 19 pick if you stay there? Like what type of player ideally would you get the most out of? Like what are the expectations for a guy at number 19?
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit different, obviously picking at 2 versus 19. When you're picking a guy in the top 5, top 10, you do expect that immediate impact. At 19, pretty much everybody you're looking at that spot, there's going to be something that they need to work on that's pretty significant. But you do want to pick a guy who's going to obviously be with you for a long period of time, a guy that fits your scheme, whether offensively or defensively. And you want to pick a guy with the right football character that exemplifies what you represent. I think all those things are really important.
And to be honest with you, the way I look at it is no matter where we pick, or who we pick, hopefully they contribute.
And you know, Ron, you talk about like reading and reacting kind of based on what teams do in front of you. How, like, you know, when you have the number 2 pick, it's just one team. But when you talk about reading and react, do you notice that most in the first round, or like how does that play for the rest of the draft? Because, you know, even though you had the number 2 pick in the 6th round last year, you know, all those teams are. But
what happens is, you know, obviously we've got to follow the first 18 picks, and then we go from there, because we'll have a group of guys that we really like. As you get later into the draft, you know, you look up at your board and you look how many guys that are still there, and you look at the rankings, where you rated them. And then sometimes, as Martin said earlier, you do start to think about need. Hey, we haven't addressed this, or we should address that. So those things will come into play as well. So that impacts it just as well as it does the first one, the first round pick, you know, because there's 18 in front of us. Now after that, you know, it'll be X amount more, X amount of more. And when that certain position starts to get a little thin and you start worrying about filling a need, you got to be careful too that you don't overreach.
Thank you.
Go Pete Haley and then Chris Russell.
Hey guys, Pete Haley, NBC Sports Washington. Martin, you're kind of going off that question. You don't only have to worry about the teams in front of you, but there are teams behind you could always vault over you and maybe take a guy that you like. How much time do you devote to that, and how do you prepare for that sort of unknown with people being behind you as well as the ones in front of you?
Yeah, well, we certainly plan to be aware of teams' needs around us. You know, pro department works on that. I know Eric has done some work with it. Chris Polian has done some work with it. So we will have an idea of what the teams around us are looking for. But, you know, I mean, really, you have to make a decision. You know, when you're at 19, as Ron said, it's about what happens in front of you. Does it make sense for you to go up if you're concerned about losing a guy? And does it make sense for us to go back if we feel like there are a large pool of guys available to us if we go back some? All that's very fluid. All that happens on draft day, and we will definitely be prepared for all that.
And then Ron, you guys signed Sammis Reyes earlier this week. I'm just curious for your story about how you first noticed him and what intrigued you so much to make you guys offer him that contract, you know, right after that pro day and get him on your roster now.
What was interesting was, you know, it turned out that Marty was actually in Florida, and that's where the IPP program for the NFL, the National Player Program Development Program, was. And so they had brought those players to a little bit of a showcase to show everybody. And so when Marty saw him, you know, he called me and Martin and Eric, and, you know, we all talked about this guy, you know, one time or another. Then when we all got together following that, I think we got together on a Monday, right, Martin? We all started talking. Yeah, it was Monday. We all started talking about it. And we said, look, for a skill set, for an athlete, you know, and to be quite honest, you know, the one name that popped into my head right away was Jimmy Graham. And you think about the great player he's become, and he's been in this league, and you start thinking, gosh, if this guy can grow and develop, you know, he came to the United States when he was 14, so he understands the seriousness of athletics. You know, he's played internationally. You know, he's got the background and the makeup, I think, that you feel good about. And then when you watch his workout tape, and you meet him in person, and then you watch him work out, you feel good about giving the young man an opportunity. And that's really what we've created. We just feel this is a guy that's got a chance. We may have to take our lumps. He may have to take a few lumps, but if he's what we project him to be, we may have done something really good here. So we're pretty excited about it.
Thank you, guys.
Russell.
Yeah, good morning, guys. A question for each one of you. Martin, I'll ask this first. You know, obviously at 19, and Ron said, you know, you have to wait for the board to come to you and all that good stuff. Do you approach different teams potentially before the draft with parameters of a trade up, just so that you know what they're looking for and what they might expect, so you don't have to make a rush decision? Or do you truly wait until a team gets on the clock and you're interested in moving up into that spot?
It's been my experience. It's always good to reach out to the teams in front of you and behind you to get some idea if they're willing to move, and what it would cost to make that move. Obviously, that can change when you're on the clock, but that's part of the normal draft process for me, is reaching out and talking to teams ahead of you and those teams that are behind you as well.
Thank you. And Ron, if you don't mind, I don't think we've asked you about this. I know Landon a couple of months ago on social media said he was not willing or wanting to be moved to linebacker. Was he speaking just for himself, or was he speaking for what you guys have already told him? Meaning, is there any chance that could happen, or is he definitely staying at safety?
No, that was Landon. Again, our plan for Landon is to have him here, have him compete, and have him being part of what we're doing going forward.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, we got time for 3 more.
Ron, you spoke in the past about the personal connections you make with prospects, like with Chase at the combine and everything. How have you had to, I guess, get creative this year in finding those and learning more about these guys with only Zoom and limited interactions at pro days and whatnot?
That's pretty much it right there. I mean, again, it's about the Zoom. It's about preparing to have that conversation, trying to get to know them a little more in-depthly, and then asking the right questions. That'll be the interesting thing. As you go through it, you make your notes, and then you go from there. So it's been an interesting process. It is harder. It really is. I'm one of those people. I like to see people in person so I can see everything. Not just their facial expressions, but their body posture, their body language, how they react. It's just, I think you get more insight into the young people when you get a chance to speak to them person to person.
Hey, Martin, broad question about the draft. Just curious, as you look at strengths and weaknesses of this class, every class is unique. What kind of stands out to you when you look at this group?
As far as where it's strong, and is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just positionally, where do you kind of think some strengths and weaknesses are?
Well, it's definitely strong at wide receiver. I think it goes pretty deep, and with guys with very varied skill sets too. I think there's some opportunity there. I won't speak to the weakness area. I don't think that makes a lot of sense, but I think we could see a significant number of wideouts that into the second, third round that are quality football players that go somewhere and make a major contribution. I think defensively, there's a good number of linebackers that I think can be pretty productive players. But I think those are 2 areas of strength here.
Last one.
Hey guys, I'm not sure who best to direct this to, but when we talk about trading up or trading down, I wonder how you guys value your draft picks. I know there's, the Jimmy Johnson chart, there's some other proprietary charts. I wonder how your team values its draft picks.
As far as I'm concerned, all our draft picks are capital, and you've got to look at how you spend them. If you trade up and you have to use one of your draft picks to do that, like let's say you traded up a 4th, well, to me, that person you end up drafting, part of that is he's partly your 4th pick. You know what I'm saying? I mean, people look at, you wasted it trading. No, you use that as capital to gain a player. So I look at them as they're valuable. I'd love to have all of our draft picks and get everything we need out of them. But sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes you go up, sometimes you go back to get more. So again, we will react to the 18 teams in front of us.